Hello and welcome to Shir haShirim class number 70. We've got a bunch of nice folks in the studio with us, and we welcome them all. Now I'm going to broaden my own little view here. Welcome to class number 70. Very exciting. We're getting close to the end of the book. By the end of tonight, we should be more than halfway through the last chapter, chapter 8. A few announcements. One is last Sunday was the yahrzeit, was the 1-year anniversary of the passing of my Rebbe, Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein, and I forgot to mention it, and I meant to dedicate the class in his memory, and I didn't. I may have had it in the back of my mind, but I didn't say it, so now I'm remembering to say it. So let's also dedicate tonight's learning in the memory of Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein, Zachariah Shimon ben Yitzchak HaKohen. We have another person coming into the live stream, and it is Sandy. Welcome, Sandy.
Good evening. Hi.
Okay, I'm trying to remember if I had any other announcements. I don't know. Too nervous. Okay. Any questions or comments before we start? I see some people in the YouTube comments. If you're on Facebook watching, you can go to streamer.com and allow permissions for me to see your comments, and I'll be able to see your Facebook comments. Anyone with any questions or comments before we start? If not, then without further ado, we're going to go ahead and get into it. Okay, so fine. Doodly-doo. I'm going to put the text on the screen. I just have to enlarge it a bit, a lot of it. Let's see. And then I'll get rid of this. And so way to get rid of that view there. I don't even know. We'll just leave it like that. That'll be as good as it gets for now. Fine. So this is what we're looking at now is verse 6, which we did last week. We're going to do a quick recap so we know what we're up to. Okay, again, chapter 8 is sort of the last period of exile before the redemption. The whole of Shir haShirim is a song between Israel and God, where she is remembering the good times prior to the exile. And there's like a whole sweeping ballad of adventures through Jewish history until the present exile, where she looks forward to being reunited with her beloved Israel, with God in the redemptive age. So we're finally sort of at that final stage of exile from which she is speaking. And she says these words. She said, this was last week, Simeni kachosam alibecha, place me as a seal upon your heart, which we said means that we ask God to sort of pay close attention to us, like something on the forefront of his mind. Kachosam al zeroecha, like a seal upon your arm. And here we pointed out that Rashi, the famous commentator, doesn't give a specific explanation of these words, but we did look at some sources that indicated that the seal upon the arm or the seal upon the hand is a reference in the Tanakh, in the scriptures, to Mashiach, the Messiah. And so therefore, place me as a seal upon your hand is like remember your promise to bring the Mashiach, and please bring him to redeem us from the exile. Because love is as strong as death. We said that our love is so powerful for you that we have endured being put to death for our loyalty to you, God. Kasha, scroll, kasha cheshol kin'ah. And the jealousy is as hard as Sheol, which we said is the grave or hell, because of the sort of hellfire, the hellish experience that the nations of the world put the Jewish nation through because of their jealousy of our relationship with God. Rishafeha rishpei eish shal havesya. It's burning coals, like the burning coals of the fire of the mighty flame, which we talked about, this intensity of the fires of hell, which we said could refer both to the not only to the persecutions of the nations toward Israel, but also the strength of the burning fire of love of the Jewish people, as we'll see in the next verse. And why that love is compared to, so to speak, the fires of hell, you have to go back to that class for more explanation. But that's essentially the breakdown of that verse. Before we get to the next verse, verse 7, any questions before I continue? Janice is here. She says, "Good day, everyone. Don't forget the video to give the video a thumbs up." Yeah, I appreciate that. Here, I'm going to alter the view a little bit. So, okay. Yeah. All right. I don't hear any questions. I don't see any comments, so I'm gonna go ahead. Okay. The next verse is Mayim rabim lo yuchelu lechabos es ha'ahava unharos lo yishtefuha im yiteinish es kol hon beiso ba'ahava bos yovuzulo, which means as follows: Mayim rabim, abundant waters, lo yuchelu, are not able, lechabos es ha'ahava, to extinguish the love. Abundant waters are not able to extinguish the love. From here we see that the comparison to fire in the previous verse is not only talking about the fiery persecutions of the nations toward Israel, but also the fiery strength of the love of Israel, because here it says that abundant waters cannot quench, cannot extinguish the love. Unharos, and rivers, lo yishtefuha, will not flood it. L'shatef in Hebrew is to flood. So like rivers won't overrun it, won't wash it out. It won't be washed out by rivers. Im yitein ish es kol hon beiso ba'ahava. If a man, im yitein ish, if a man would give as kol hon beiso, all the hon beiso is like all the value of his house, all the treasures in his house, all of his possessions, kol hon beiso, all the possessions of his household. If a person would give such a thing, ba'ahava, in the love, or with the love, we'll explain what that means, boz yavuzu lo, they will be wasted for him. It would be wasted for him. Meaning that if a person would, so to speak, come to the woman in the poem, in the song, who is Israel, and say, "I'll give you a bribe to abandon your God. I'll give you all the money that I have, as much money as a person could offer." Boz yavuzulo, it would be like a waste. It would be a waste of money, because it would not be effective. It would not change the love of Israel for God, not even for all the money in the world. Okay, that's essentially the basic translation of the verse. Any questions before we look at the commentary? Okay, feel free to speak up at any time. All right. Let's continue. Yeah, so the commentary says like this. Okay, Maim rabim lo yuchlu lechaboses ha'ahava. Abundant waters are not able, will not be able to extinguish the love. So here's where we saw this Rashi last week. Last week we looked at this Rashi to help us this comment of Rashi to help us understand the previous verse, some of the euphemisms in the previous verse, where he says here that since in the previous verse we used an analogy to burning coals, so now we're using the language of not being extinguished. But from this phrase in Rashi, we understood in the previous verse that the fire of the coals referred also to the love, not only to the persecutions, the fire of the persecutions, but also to the fire of love. Because in this verse, it tells us it cannot be extinguished with abundant waters. Now, what are abundant waters? Rashi says, Mayim rabim, abundant waters, ha'umos, the nations. The abundant waters are the nations. The nations of the world tried to extinguish the love of Israel for God, like abundant waters to a fire, and they're unable. Now, I had a question on this. Before I go too much into it, does anyone have any questions at this point? Because I already have a question on this. Before I say it, giving everyone else a chance. Okay. Let me know if you think of something. Maybe we'll just go through all of Rashi's comments on this verse and we'll circle back and see what needs analysis. Okay. Unaharos and the rivers. It says the rivers would not flood it out, would not wash it away. What's the rivers? Sarehem umalchayem. Their officers and their kings. So the abundant waters are the nations, and the rivers are the particular dignitaries, officers, kings, rulers of the nations. These forces cannot wash out, cannot extinguish the love. Okay? Lo yishtafuha, they will not wash it away. Rashi says, al yedei chozik ve'ema, through strength and fear, like strength, fear, threat. V'af al yedei fitui v'hasasa, and also not even through pitui v'hasasa. Pitui means seduction, and hasasa means like influencing. Literally means like to turn someone towards something, through manipulation. I don't know what coaxing. I don't know what word in English is good for it, but essentially they won't be able to change they won't be able to sever our connection to God, not through force and also not through gentle coaxing, persuasion. That's the word, not through persuasion or seduction. Okay, so like obviously we look at these two. The persecutions are the force and the strength when they try to kill and torment Jews, etc. And the seduction and persuasion is like you might call like on its face, like missionary activity where they tried to persuade a person to accept willingly, not through coercion, but willingly accept another faith. But even when it's not necessarily to draw one actively into another religion, but just to create an environment in which one is seduced after certain pleasing ends that require an abandonment of faith, whether it's forbidden foods or forbidden activities or other forbidden pleasures that a person is tempted. Person is tempted by his environment and the people in his environment to do things that he shouldn't do. So you don't need to be Jewish even for this. When a person tries to influence you to do drugs or alcohol or any of these vices that can really ruin a person's life. And we don't need to go into too much particular about all the vices that are out there in our world that are very easy to fall into and to be influenced into by people around us who are doing them. In the same way, a person can be influenced in this way to sort of willingly abandon their relationship with God and pursue something else, whether it's a different worship or a different lifestyle. Okay, so none of these tactics will be effective against the Jewish people. Even if a person would give all of his money, says Rashi, in order to get you to abandon your love for God, it would be a waste for him. He would be wasting his money trying to do such a thing. Rashi says, Kol Eila Kadosh Baruch Hu veizdino meidim. These words that we just read were said by whom? Who said these words? Who is saying this? It's the Holy One, blessed is he, and his court, his heavenly court of angelic ministers, are testifying this to be true. They are testifying that abundant waters won't extinguish the love, not the nations, not their kings and nobles and officers and rulers, not through strength and force, not through seduction and persuasion, not through all the bribes and monies in the world. Shekach Knesset Yisrael misrapekas al doda, that in such a way does the congregation of Israel hold fast to her beloved. And this phrase, Misrapekes al Doda, she holds fast her beloved, is back from verse number 5. When we saw Mizos Olam and Abidbar, Misrapekes al Doda, who is this one who was coming up from the desert, holding fast to her beloved? You could go back to the class on verse 5 for more information on that. But all this is related to verse 5. We're now what? Verse 7, where God and his heavenly court are testifying regarding the fealty, the loyalty, the great indefatigable love of the Jewish people. Okay, that's the long and short of Rashi's comments here. I have some analysis to discuss, but before I do that, I'm interested to hear from you guys. Anyone with any questions or comments? No? Okay. So here are some thoughts that I had on this. Here, the nations are called water. In the previous verse, they were called fire, right? The persecutions of the nations they were coals, they were flame, they were fire. And here, all of a sudden, they're water. So why the shift? Why the shift? In other words, you're going to tell me it can't put out, we said fire, so we can't, what do we put out the fire with? Water. Yeah, that's true. But even in the previous verse, we also called their persecutions fire. So why change it? Maybe it's not a big a question as I am making it out to be, but it kind of stuck out at me and I had a thought about it. I think Rashi's actually addressing it. Aside from what he said about the poetic language of fire and water quenches fire. And then my second question here was it talks about abundant waters and then it talks about rivers. There's the nations and there's their leaders. Now, are these two different? In other words, okay, the nations are just kind of like the man on the street and the leaders are the people in power. Is there a necessity in mentioning both separately? What would be lost if we just said abundant waters without the rivers? Would we not know from the comment that the nations are attempting to quench the fire, that would we not know that their rulers and kings, officers, etc., are included in that? And in what way are the persecutions of the rulers and the nobles, the kings, etc., the officers, is that distinct and unique from the others? What are these two separate descriptions of the attempted extinguishing of the fire? There's abundant waters and there's rivers. Okay, so abundant waters represents the nations and the rivers their leaders. Okay, but are those really two unique things that I could understand why they both need to be mentioned? Like from one, I see something that I don't see from the other. So I'm wondering about that. What is uniquely different here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are you asking or are you going to?
Yeah, I'm asking.
I don't know if this is what, I think there's a big difference. First of all, abundant waters is a kind of an amorphous thing like the nations. I mean, Jews can live in the nations and they can come under pressure from communities or whatever, from individuals, but individuals and communities never can ever exert truly compelling pressure against a Jew. To have that, you have to have a more focused or directed form of influencing and or of coercion. And that's what is represented by the rivers, which are more focused, more directed. When you can be seduced far quicker by a powerful person than by a relatively non-powerful member of a larger society or whatever. I think I don't know. My impression is that if you really, really want to come under pressure, if you really want to buckle to pressure, it's usually to people in a leadership position, people who are very powerful, who can seduce in a very direct and immediate way. That's how kind of like I was thinking about it, but I don't know. It's you know, when I'm in the presence of somebody who's powerful, I'm a different person than when I'm in a presence of just, other people who may have the same agenda. But a powerful person has a certain gravitas. They have a certain power to make things happen. They have a certain threat that seems to come along with them. They have a great deal of, personal power, which is very, very difficult to withstand, extremely difficult to withstand. So anyway, that was just one thought that I had.
Okay. I accept your thought.
If I might just add just a little something to that,
Yeah.
my thinking was the idea of the difference between the Weimar Republic and then the government under Adolf Hitler. The Weimar Republic, there wasn't the whole nation was not against the Jewish people, but they had the moments of attacks and things like that, pogroms. But then the whole country was a flood. And it was a flood that was trying to wash the whole nation away. So just adding on to what the gentleman said prior to.
So
Great point.
it could come in these two forms. We see that historically. Okay. Any thought about why we switch from fire to water?
Oh. I haven't got there. But I apologize. My background, as you were reading this and the waters versus the rivers and things, I was flashing back to when they tell us that story of Jesus' temptation. And I think it involves two different kinds of high places, the pinnacle of the temple and a high mountain. But one thing is an external and one thing is an internal kind of something that will come from outside, but something that can influence you from inside. I'm wondering.
Okay, so I can't say
I'm not sure how to phrase
with
it. What
this.
I'm wondering
Which
about.
one are you addressing the fire? You're not addressing the fire and water. You're addressing
I
the
was
river and abundant
Still
waters.
on the previous question, yes.
Okay, so how are you're saying there's the internal and external. So which is which over here?
On the sense when you talk about the nations coming from out, they would. A river can wash you away. Waters, I don't know that they necessarily do, but it's a different type of influence. One is an external pressure that you may or may not be able to resist. The other is something that you can give into. That is my question. Is there also an element of that? I mean, I've kind of wondered about, but this is saying that no matter where and what the pressure is, Israel's not going to turn from God. Their love of God is so strong that even a threat, even a promise. I guess that's what I'm getting at with likening it to stories I had heard in my New Testament background, is that you can have a threat versus a promise, which in a way, I guess the gentleman that mentioned about Hitler, I'm thinking some people are simply overrun by the strength of the threat of loss. Some people are overrun by a promise of potentially avoiding it. And both things are a danger to our soul and our love of God. And both need to be withstood. That was what my question was.
Well, I'm not so much hearing the question. It sounds like you're offering a resolution.
Oh, sorry.
Again, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Thinking out loud, I was wondering.
Yeah, well, I would say what you're saying sounds like what Rashi is saying in the next comments, that it won't be washed away, not through strength and fear, and not through a seduction and persuasion. So
Now I'll be quiet.
in other words, there's a threat and then there's a promise. You're saying someone could say you better do this or else, and there's like, if you do this, there's like a reward waiting for you. Those are two ways to persuade a person to do a thing. But I'm not so much hearing how that addresses the abundant waters versus the rivers. You're saying one of these is the threat and one of these is the promise?
That's what I was wondering. That's the question. Is one like a threat and one like a promise? That was my question.
I don't know the answer. I would say maybe. That's my answer to you is maybe. In other words, Cliff made a suggestion, and Stephen said something similar, and I'm accepting of that.
Mhm.
That could be a resolution. What you're saying could be a resolution. I'm not negating any of that. I'm not the man with the answers. I'm also grappling to understand the text. So I open it up for you to understand it how it's meaningful to you and share that with the group, and I'll do the same what I think, but I don't have what I'm saying is not definite either. So
Mhm.
I appreciate your contribution. What I would say is this. I think this is what's happening here. The key is, I believe, the phrase in Rashi that says here, not through strength and fear, and not through seduction and persuasion. There are two ways, like you're saying. I'm not necessarily fitting that into these words here, the abundant waters versus the rivers. But we do see that Rashi is talking about force and persuasion. Okay. I believe that this comment of Rashi is not meant to refer specifically to these two words. It shall not be washed away. It won't wash it away. But that he's now kind of circling back to both verses together. In the previous verse, when we spoke about fire, that is the force and the strength. And this verse that's speaking out water is speaking about the seduction and the persuasion. And I was thinking of these two waters as two different types of seduction. You have the nations as a whole, meaning you have the society. When we are surrounded by a certain society, we are influenced by that society. And the reality is that the Jewish people has suffered a great deal because of assimilation, because of influence from the society outside. We've lost a very great deal of Jews who have lost their connection to Judaism, to tradition, to their people, because of Mayim Rabin, because of the nations, this just water that surrounds us everywhere. And we've very much been a victim of that. Now, this word speaking, it won't be severed, obviously means won't be totally severed, because there is a segment that is affected by this, but it will never totally put us out. We'll always have, what the prophets call a righteous remnant, which is the focus of these phrases. And as for the rivers, the leaders, so this was my thought, and you're welcome to disagree, because I admit that it's a little hard to assert that this is Rashi's meaning when he didn't say it outright. But the leaders and the kings is also, like you're saying, Sandy, is a certain promise. And we saw this earlier in Shir haShirim. I think it was the beginning of chapter 7, where she says, Shuvi, Shuvi Hashulamis, Shuvi, Shuvi V'neches Ebach. Turn back, O perfect one. Turn back, and let us see you. And Rashi said the seeing there is a seeing a person's positive qualities and appointing them to a high position based on those qualities. As we find that phraseology when Moses appoints judges, it says, he saw them, and he saw in them these positive qualities, and he appointed them judges, that they were fearful of sin, and they were disdainful of money. They wouldn't take bribes. They were honest, etc., etc. So there's a seeing of a certain high quality, and then you appoint someone to a high position, that the nations give us a promise. If you will if you will assimilate, if you will join our society, if you will convert, whatever the case may be, we will appoint you to high positions. And this historically did happen, so that the officers and the kings that's being referenced here is, it could be they're the ones making the promise, but it could be that's what the promise is. Like, hey, we're officers and kings, and we will appoint you to high positions in our government, to high positions of influence in our society, if you'll be like us, if you'll assimilate and follow the rules we want you to follow. And historically, that did occur. We had many Jews who converted to Christianity in order to be accepted into their society, into high positions of authority, influence, wealth, etc. You have people like Benjamin Disraeli, who was the prime minister of England, but from a historically Jewish family that assimilated in order to achieve high social status. They converted. There was no sincerity in the conversion. It was purely for social acceptance. And in that generation in Europe, that's what was going on en masse, is that for social status, Jews were converting because they had lived in ghettos and they were being welcomed into the society around them with the unspoken rule that if you're Christian, we'll accept you, but if you're Jewish, we're not going to accept you. So to get that ticket into high society, many, 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 many Jews accepted conversion to Christianity. So I feel like both of these phrases regarding the water are the type of attack on Judaism that comes from seduction and persuasion, as opposed to force and fear, which is the fire. So, and the seduction and persuasion come in two forms: the masses, the assimilating into the society because of societal influence, and from it comes from the nobles and the rulers and the kings, etc., who give that promise of the reward of social status and power and influence if we will conform to their society. So that's the way I chose to look at it in order to make sense of all these different seemingly conflicting phrases. That's what I do with it.
That would make sense to me when I look back at some of the stories like Joseph or Daniel or others that have been during times not by looking for it themselves, but put into positions because of qualities seen in them. But in all the stories, it does not put them automatically in a permanent safe position.
Right. And also, those people are remarkable for their loyalty and faithfulness in those positions of pressure. They never bend the knee. Daniel's thrown to the lions, but he remains faithful. Joseph remains faithful. All these righteous people, they do endure this test and they remain faithful. And I think that's sort of the praise that's being given here, although we also see at the same time how much that was a real threat and how much it really did damage the integrity of the Jewish people. So any other questions or comments on this verse, or I'll move it on. I'll take us forward. Okay. So verse number 8. Now, the end of Rashi's comments, he ends off with this word, atah. Atah means now, which means sort of like this is a prelude to the next verse. So the God and his heavenly court are testifying to the loyalty of the Jewish people, or at least the righteous remnant, that they'll never be swept away by these influences. And now, from that comes this statement, which we'll see who's saying it, but it seems to follow from the heavenly court. Achos lanu ketano v'shadayim ein la ma na'aseh la'achosenu bayom sheyidu barba. That means this. Achos lanu ketana. We have a little sister. It's literally what it means. Achos means sister. Lanu. For us, we have a sister. Ketana. Little. We have a little sister. So there's a we speaking. There's a plurality speaking. We have a little sister. V'shadayim ein la. And she does not have breasts. It's literally what it means. So little sister doesn't have breasts. Ma na'aseh la'achosenu. What can we do for our sister? Bayom sheyidu barba. On the day when she is spoken about. We have a little sister. She does not have breasts. What can we do for our sister on the day that she is spoken about. That's the straightforward translation. Any questions on that translation before I dive into the commentary? Janice says, the note in my Tanakh says, God in his tribunal bear witness to Israel's love for her beloved. Yes, that's exactly what we've been saying. And now we see, and I'm welcoming other comments, that this plurality is speaking about their little sister. The little sister we'll see is Israel, and the plurality, the we who are speaking are the divine court, the court of God, the ministering angels. And they're saying this before God. What can we do for our sister on the day that she's spoken about? What does that mean? Okay, please interrupt at any time with questions or comments. Rashi's commentary says as follows: Achos lana, we have a little sister, batachtonim, in the world below. Tachtonim means below. Shehi misacha umischaberes umisava lios imanu. She is mitacha, from the word like ach. Ach means brother. Achot is the feminine, it means sister. She, mitacha, is a reflexive verb. She's doing something to herself that is a verb form of brother, which means, Rashi will tell us, that means she is joining together. Like it says in the next word, umitchaberet. Mitchaberet literally means joining together. And you could even see in the word echad, which means one, it has something of this root of joining together. She is mitacha umitchaberet. She's coming together, joining together in a certain type of a brotherhood. Umisave lios imanu. And she desires to be with us. She desires to be with us. Now, I hadn't really considered till now that I'm saying it, what this means. She desires to be with us. What does that mean? She desires to be with us. I'm not even sure.
We've lost the text.
What's that?
We've lost the text.
Uh-oh. Thank you for notifying me. Let me get that back up there.
Sure.
I don't know why that happened. Okay. Okay. So right over here, tell me if it happens again. I'm sorry. She desires to be with us. Not sure why the heavenly court is saying she desires to be with us. Sounds like she wants to be dead and heaven, but I don't quite think that is correct. So we have to contemplate that. I didn't think that through. But anyway, this is what Rashi says. We have a sister in the world below. She is coming together with brotherhood and joining together, and she desires to be with us. We'll make something of that, I hope. And she is small. She is small, and she makes herself smaller than all the other nations. As it says, and it quotes a verse here in Deuteronomy, the citation is Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 7. Where Rashi quotes these words, Lo meru bichem, not because of your multitude. So I put the full citation in the footnotes here, where it says, not because of your miru bichem mikol ha'amim, not because you are greater in number than all the nations. Choshak Hashem bachem, did God desire you, vayivchar bachem, and choose you. Because you are the least of all the nations. So it wasn't the plain meaning, it wasn't because of your great number. God wasn't so impressed with you because you were so numerous that he said, look at this great big nation. That's my nation. You're the least of all the nations. You're so small in number. So that's not why. Rather, because of your forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the promise, etc. Okay. Righteousness. Fine. But what Rashi does on that verse, maybe we'll get to it soon. Let's that's the verse. Let's go back to the commentary here. Here's where he says, achos, the sister, is a word which has to do with joining together, like brotherly unity, unifying, right? Now, what does it mean? Shadaim ein la. She doesn't have breasts. Rashi says, Ke'inin shenemar b'galus Mitzrayim, like it says regarding the time that the Jews were exiled in Egypt. When the Jews were in Egypt, the prophet Ezekiel has a whole parable where he talks about God redeeming the Jews from Egypt in the parable of redeeming a girl. And it talks about this baby girl. If you read in Ezekiel chapter 16, and I put it also in the notes, that it's this parable of a girl being born, and she was sort of abandoned, this baby that's abandoned, and even her umbilical cord had not yet been cut. She had not been washed. She had not been salted. They would salt the skin to dry it, and had not been wrapped. So this naked, bloody, wet baby with the umbilical cord still attached is laying on the ground. That's Israel in Egypt, neglected and abused. He says, no, there was no eye that had pity on you. You were thrown onto the field in a disgusting way on the day you were born. And I passed over you and I saw you laying in your blood. And I said to you, by your blood you shall live, by your blood you shall live. Now, this verse is one that we pronounce at a circumcision. By your blood you shall live, by your blood you shall live, because we were redeemed in the merit, the sages tell us, of two bloods, the blood of circumcision and the blood of the Paschal lamb, which we performed before the Exodus. So that's the parable of the blood. He said, by your blood you shall live, by your blood you shall live. Now, this verse, I rainbowified it because this is the one that Rashi quotes. It says, you became numerous like the grass of the field. I made you numerous like the grass of the field. Tirbi, and you became, Tirbi is also like you became multiplicitous, great in number. Vatigdili, and you grew. Vatavoi ba'adi adayim, and you came to adi adayim, is like from the word ad in Hebrew, which means until. You came to a stage of maturity. Shadayim nachonu, your breasts were developed. Usarich tzimeach, and your hair sprouted. And this is talking about the hair of puberty. Va'at erom ve'eria, but you were naked. You were naked and uncovered. And I passed over you and I saw you. And behold, your time was a time of love, meaning you had reached the age where you were fitting for courtship. And I spread my cloak over you, and I covered your nakedness, and I swore to you, and I came into a covenant with you, said the Lord of hosts, and you became mine. And I washed you in water, and I washed away the blood from upon you, and I anointed you in oil, and I dressed you. And he goes through, he dressed you in these extravagant clothes, and all that is a parable for the way God took us out of Egypt, and we got the tabernacle, and we got the covenant at Sinai, and we got the clothing of the priesthood, etc., etc. I crowned you with a crown. Talked a lot about that. I put bracelets upon your hands. Rashi there says the bracelets are the tablets, the two tablets that on the hands, like 5 and 5. We spoke about that. And I gave you a necklace upon your neck, and I put a ring in your nose and earrings, and all these, a crown on your head. All these are representative in the parable, etc., etc. He talks about how he decks her out, and then it goes on to say, you became so beautiful that the other nations desired your beauty, and they seduced you, and you went after them, and you weren't faithful, and it becomes a very dire prophecy after that. But in the middle of it, it talks about that the time when she was of maturity to be redeemed from Egypt is described as the maturity of a girl going through these stages of adolescence, including the development of the breasts. So here, when the angels are saying about her that she doesn't have breasts, says Rashi, Behagia es hageula, the development of the breasts in the parable of Ezekiel refers to the time of the redemption, but she has not developed that. Means aval zu shadayim ein la, she doesn't have breasts. Adayin lo higia ita la'ez dodim. She has not yet reached the age of la'ez dodim, the age of love, meaning the time where she is mature enough to have a husband, meaning for God to redeem her. Israel is in exile, and they haven't yet reached the time of their redemption. And because of that, because she's in this condition of not being redeemed, what can we do for our sister on the day that she is spoken about? What does that mean? When the nations whisper about her in order to, la'achida literally means like to conflict her, to like erase her, to get rid of her, to destroy her. Okay, and in Shenemar, as it says in the verse in Psalms, chapter 83, verse 5, it says, L'chu v'nach chidem migoy. Let us go and wipe them out from being a nation. And if you look in Psalms 53, it goes through how the different nations of the world are all united in their council to basically eliminate the Jewish people from the face of the earth, and how God will destroy them and save us. But because it talks there about how the nations are constantly planning the demise of Israel, so the angels are saying, what should we do for our sister on the day when she is spoken about, on the day when the nations are consorting to destroy her because she's not yet redeemed, she's in this unredeemed condition. What can we do for her? Because we've spoken now about her love and her righteousness, etc., etc. So now she's in this endangered condition in exile, and we wish to that she should be redeemed from such a condition. Okay, any questions on that? We've got some spam on the channel. Got to get rid of that spam. It's not appearing on my YouTube, but it is appearing on my StreamYard. All right, hopefully it's filtered out. Anyway, so I don't know if there's any comments on that, but what I wanted to point out, number one, is you see that there's a merit here of that specifically the angels are paying attention to her and are caring about her condition in exile when she is uniting, when the Jewish people are coming together and being united. When the Jewish people are fragmented, that's what got us into the exile. When we had what's called sinat chinam, hatred of one Jew to another, which we spoke about in the previous chapters, in chapter 6, at the end of chapter 6, was what led the fragmentation, and the hatred of Jew to Jew is what led to the destruction of the temple. But when she is uniting, this leads to a sort of divine mercy, where there's a concern to save her from the exile. Now there's here Rashi talks about the how she makes herself smaller than the other nations. I wanted to look together at a passage in the Talmud where Rashi's drawing this comment from. So it says over here in the Talmud in Chulin 89a, it says, not because of your multitude from all the peoples did God desire you. So the Talmud analyzes the verse as follows. The Holy One, blessed be He, said to Israel, I desire you because, why do I desire you? Because even at the time when I act towards you with great abundant goodness and greatness, and I basically shower you with greatness, you make yourself small. Even when I build you up, says God, you put your heads down before me. You humble yourselves to me. I gave greatness to Abraham. He said before me, when I gave greatness to Abraham, he said before me, Vanochi afar va'efer, I am dust and ashes, in Genesis 18:27. Right? I raised Abraham up, and he said, I am dust and ashes. He made himself humble. I gave greatness to Moses and Aaron, and they said, Vanachnu ma, and what are we? What are we? We're nothing. That's in Exodus 16, verse 7. I gave King David greatness, and he said, Va'anochi tolas v'lo ish, I'm a worm and not a man. However, the Ovdei Kochavim, the idol worshippers, are not this way. I gave greatness to Nimrod. Nimrod, who's a character in the book of Genesis. And what did he say? Hava nivlanu ir, let's build a city. He wanted to give himself more grandeur, And the commentaries tell us that the purpose of building the city and the tower was to, in a certain way, try to revolt against God. And that's in Genesis 11, verse 4. That's the Tower of Babel. They built the Tower of Babel. When God gave the idolaters greatness, they built the Tower of Babel. When I gave Pharaoh greatness, he said, who is God? Right? And Moses and Aaron said, Hashem said, let my people go. They said, who is Hashem? Who is he? He gave you your greatness. Who is he? I don't recognize him. You Jews, God gives you greatness. You humble yourself to him and say, I'm nothing, Hashem. It's all from you. You're everything and I'm nothing. When I give to them, they say, we're everything and you, God, are nothing. They make the Tower of Babel to rebel against God. Pharaoh says, who is God? To Sancheriv I gave greatness, and he said, who among all the gods of the lands? And then there's an ellipsis. So what's the full verse? 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 35. I think I have a footnote on it, don't I? Oh, maybe I put it up here. 2 Kings. Did I not put it in? I thought I did. Must have missed it. Okay. Somehow I don't see it in the notes, but it's a verse where he basically says, he's mightier than all the gods of all the lands because he conquered all these lands and he defeated all their gods. So he's saying to the Jewish people, and you think that Hashem is going to be stronger than me? So he makes himself arrogant above Hashem. And finally it says Nebuchadnezzar said, when I gave him greatness, he says, Ela al bamase of, I'm going to go up upon high places on the clouds. Adam la elyon. I'm going to make myself similar to the Most High. He says, I'm going to go up and be like God. When I give to Hiram, Melech Tzor, Hiram, the king of Tyre, I gave him greatness. He said, Moshe Elohim yashavti b'lev yamim. I am sitting in the place of God in the center of the sea, because Tyre was on the sea and they had a very powerful empire. They were very rich. And he said, my seat is like the seat of God. So all the idolaters were given power and they used it to rebel against God, where the Jewish people were given power and they humbled themselves to God. So that is the meaning here when it says that I have a little sister. What does it mean, little? She's little in that Rashi says she makes herself little. She makes herself little. And that's why. So the verse, it wasn't because of your bigness, or we said your multitude that God chose you. But in other words, it wasn't because of how big you were, but rather you're the smallest of all the nations. Doesn't mean here a number. It means because you weren't arrogant and you made yourself humble. That's why I chose you, said God. That's the quality that I see in you, that it's desirable, the humility. And that's the little sister. She's the little sister. She's the sister because it comes from a Hebrew root, which means brotherhood and unity. And that's the quality which brings God's interest and mercy upon the Jewish people. Small because we're humble. She doesn't have breasts because she's unredeemed. What can we do for our sister on the day that she is spoken of, on the day that the nations plan to destroy her? What can we do for her? How can we help her, save her, etc.? Okay, we're going to have to pause here. Sometimes I go over time, but I'm not going to. I'm going to leave with a parting question, which is actually when we get to the verses that follow, we may see something of a contradiction that will bring us back to this verse, and we'll discuss it then. But for now, those are the end of my remarks on this verse. And if anyone has any questions or comments, so let's do that quickly. Oh, the text disappeared again. I'm sorry. But yeah, I have a comment here. She won't be redeemed until the third temple is built. I mean, the redemption and the building of the third temple are kind of synonymous events. Spooky's here. Hello. Maximus, that's why it must be you. Gladiator. Exactly. Deep cut. Exactly. Okay, I have to run. Feel free to email me, Rabbi Rafi Mallet at gmail.com. And that's it.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, we're finishing on time tonight, but I don't have any more time to spare.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, everybody, thanks for coming. Thanks for participating. Have yourselves a wonderful night. Bye.